Okay, so in this lesson we're going to build this Sarrus wheel. This wheel comes with a handle, and that handle is going to drive some of the mechanisms associated with our Sarrus mechanism. But in doing this wheel and putting this wheel together, we're going to learn a couple different sketch entities that we can apply here. So we're going to first start with the hub. Let's take a rollback bar and roll this back a little bit. You can see what we're going to be accomplishing. And if we go to the very top, actually, we're going to be choosing aluminum bronze for this as a material because it kind of looks pretty. And the hub's going to be this feature over here, this sketch over here. We're just going to revolve it around that center line right in the right plane. So we're going to go ahead and revolve that around, and what that's going to do is provide us with a 1/2 inch hole. It's going to be 3/4 of an inch wide, and then the top is going to be variable. We can make it 1.3, 1.4, but it kind of gives it a round look to it. So if we rebuild that and go to the next one's going to be a wheel. So if we look at the profile of the wheel and go to the sketch, or go to the section tool and cut that in half, let's go ahead and cut it this way. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be applying an ellipse in here. That's going to help define that. So let's go ahead and get out of that and take a look at the sketch that drives that. If we right click it and go to that sketch, very basic. It's kind of like a circle, and we're going to go to that center line that we have in the middle of this and go to that center line and provide a diameter on that, and that's going to give us a diameter of the donut, the torus, as we'll oftentimes call it. And this is defined by, it's an ellipse, and if you go up to the sketch tab on Command Manager, we're looking at this element in here. So the way this works is you define the center of that ellipse, you sketch it out in one direction, you sketch it out in the other direction, and you apply various dimensions on it. So the 3/4 inch dimension, which means it's half as much longer than the 1/2 inch dimension here. Plus you have to do something extra, so it gives you these points in here. You have to define these points too before it comes fully defined. So these 2 points are going to be horizontal to each other. And that'll define that ellipse, and we're just going to go ahead and rotate that around. The next one is going to be the spoke. And this will be kind of interesting. What we're going to be using here is going to be the slot tool. So if we right click on sketch 7 and go to that, and we're going to go normal to that and see what that looks like, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sketching out a line in here, and on that line there's going to be an offset for the edge of that slot. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but the length of the slot is going to be 0.4 inches, and the radius of this portion of the slot up here is going to be 0.13 inches. And then one interesting thing we're going to be doing about that is when we go to the feature on that one, which is going to be an extrude, we're going to do an offset in that. So the first offset is going to be right here in the middle. So the first offset is going to be 1 inch. So now we have that sketch in here, kind of a virtual sketch in here. And we're going to be telling it to go up to next, which is going to be the torus of here. And then the direction number 2 is going to be up to next down here too. So now we have that sketch, that virtual sketch is going to go up to that surface up here and then down to this surface. Now we're going to do the wheel handle, and that's pretty basic. That just comes out like that. We're going to be doing that for the front plane, and then we're going to put in fillets around that, and then finally we're going to end this with a circular pattern. We're going to do 7 of these spokes with the fillets, and we're going to make that go all the way around our wheel. Okay, so let's start with the hub. Let's take our rollback bar and roll that all the way back as far as we can go. And we can't go any further than the origin, so we can delete all the stuff that we like. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sketching on the right plane. We're going to do this pretty quick. So we're going to go normal to that plane. And we're going to go ahead and put in some lines in here. So go to the sketch tab on the Command Manager. Center line, we're going to go ahead and sketch the center line horizontally and then vertically. We're going to choose this midpoint of that center line and make a coincident relationship with the origin. Sketch that out a little bit. And this time we're going to make a center line. We're just going to make that go up. So we're going to put all of our model geometry on the top here. So first thing we want to do is you want to put a line in here. And there's another way of doing this line too. Since we're going to be providing a midpoint relationship here, let's go ahead and use a midpoint line. We're going to go ahead and sketch that out. Sometimes it's hard to pick up that horizontal relationship, but yeah, there it goes. So we're going to provide a dimension between that line and the center line. We're going to make that a 1/2 inch. So right now it's like 2 inches, but 0.5 is going to go ahead and scale the lines that we have in here, which actually makes that turn out okay. And then we're going to go ahead and provide a width of that. So we're going to put a 3/4 of an inch dimension on that. That kind of gives us an idea what this is going to look like. So we're going to put some connected lines and an arc across the top, another connected line down here, and this is going to be the void where the hole is going to be. So it's a little bit a different way of thinking about this. But if you think about this dimension, if we're to click on that dimension, go over here to liters. Remember, we can go back and forth between radius and diameter, and right here in this situation is actually going to be real. I mean, that's going to be the diameter dimension of that hole we're going to create. So green check mark. Let's go ahead and put a line in here and maybe go up a little bit. Let's go ahead and take that line. We're going to mirror it to the other side. So click those two items, the center line and that line is going to go to the other side. And let's just go ahead and put an arc all the way across. And now this time we're going to go ahead and put a dimension between that arc and this line. And now we're going to go to diameter down here, or we can go to radius. Let's go to diameter and just drop that in there at an arbitrary value. And we're going to go ahead and click on it, go back to liters, or a liter on that. We're going to make that a maximum. So we're going to go from the very top of the arc down to the bottom. So it's going to be the diameter of that. And let's go ahead and make that maybe 1.4. So it should be fully defined, but let's go ahead and see what we need to do by pulling on some of these endpoints to fully define this. So what we need to do here is we need to define maybe this width here, that length of that line. So let's go ahead and go to Smart Dimension. Let's go ahead and dimension that at maybe 0.2. Kind of make that an exaggerated arc in here. And let's go ahead and go right to our features. So if we go to Feature tab, Revolved Boss Space. I think it's almost ready to go. We're going to go 360 degrees. We're going to go ahead and select all the default settings. What I was looking for here is the axis of revolution. If we click on that, now you can see what that's going to look like. And green check mark, and now we have our hub in place. So let's go ahead and rename that from Revolve 1. Let's go ahead and call that our hub. Now, we already have a feature in here called hub. So here's a little trick. It's not going to let us do that. It's not going to let us name it the same name. But if you type in hub and maybe space a couple times, now we get it. Okay, so let's continue on. Let's go ahead and use the ellipse. We're going to put in the wheel portion of this, or the torus, as it might be called. So let's go ahead and choose the right plane. Let's go ahead and make that normal 2. If we were to right-click on it, we have that normal 2 function in here. So we can see where we're going to be sketching. What we're going to do is we're going to sketch an ellipse out here, 4 inches from the center down here, that center line which is going to go down here horizontally. And then we're going to revolve that around. So let's do this. Let's go up to our Sketch tab. Let's go to center line, and we're going to go ahead and choose the right plane for that. And we're just going to sketch a center line right down the middle of that. Right click on that, select midpoint, and then that point we're going to make that coincident. And then we're going to, I don't think we need a vertical center line, but just for good measure, let's go ahead and put that in too, because we might be able to use geometry from that. So now with the Sketch tab open, let's go ahead and go to Ellipse, and let's go ahead and sketch that out. So we can put it right in that center line. And we can sketch it out. You know, it starts out kind of like a circle. We're going to define one end of that circle, and then we're going to define the other end of that circle and kind of make it appear like that. Might want to, since these 2 points are not really on that ellipse, if we go ahead and park one of those points in there, it's going to create a coincident relationship. That kind of helps lock that into place. And I don't think we really needed to do it up there, but we have another coincident relationship up there too. Another way of doing this, it's just very simply just taking 2 points in here and making those either horizontal or vertical, and that helps define that too. So let's take the center point of that ellipse, and let's go to that line which goes right through our center here, and let's go ahead and grab the diameter of that by going over that center line. We're going to make that 4 inches. So now we're going to go ahead and put in some dimensions between these 2 points. We're going to make that a 1/2 inch. And between this point, the top point, and the bottom point of that ellipse, we're going to make that 3/4 inch. If you do that, now you can see it's fully defined. It's fully defined because we defined 2 of these points as being horizontal. We have a length and width dimension up here, considering those points on the ellipse. And the ellipse's position with the origin down here, we provided that there too. So now let's go ahead and finish this. If we go to Features, Revolved Boss Space, asking for an axis of revolution. We're not going to go to any other options in here. And now we have that in place. If we go to the green check mark, bang. Now we have the rings of Saturn. So let's go ahead and rename this. We're going to be calling this our wheel. And just like last time, put in a couple spaces in there and allows us to rename those features with the same name. Okay, so let's put in a spoke. This is a little tricky, but you know, it actually makes a whole lot of sense to do this. The desire here might be to put in some reference geometry and then sketch from that plane, perhaps a plane in the middle of this, and then extrude up and then extrude down to the next surface or the next. But we could do this simply by using the planes that we already have. So if you go to the top plane and go to Sketch, and let's go ahead and right click on that top plane and make it normal to, and let's see what we're going to be doing. We're going to be going up here to our slot tool. We're not going to go into a whole lot of detail about slot tools, but let me show you the first one up here, which is going to be our straight slot, or a Centerpoint Straight Slot. Let's go ahead and you choose that one, but they're all very similar. They have very different, some variations in regard to how they come out. Straight slot allows us to make a slot from one point to another point, and then we define the width of that slot or the radius of that slot. Centerpoint slot allows us to start from the very center, like maybe the origin, which is in here, and then sketch that up in one direction. And the third item we want to define over here is kind of like the ellipse. You go off in one direction, go off in the other direction, and you get that defined. Now a 3-point arc, kind of like a 3-point, three-point arc slot here. It's just like the 3-point arc, and then the Centerpoint arc slot is just like the Centerpoint arc, so it sketches out in a very similar manner. So let's do Centerpoint Straight Slot, or Centerpoint Straight Slot. And now the origin appears. We're going to sketch that up here a little bit. Try not to pick up any other relationships besides a coincident with the origin and looks like vertical. And then we're going to sketch that out. Now we have that slot in place. So there's a lot of flexibility with the slot. We have a vertical line relationship on that line, so we're not going to be able to rotate that. But let's go ahead and put a dimension in here. We want to put a dimension between this arc and that arc. And we're going to put that out to the side. And kind of an arbitrary value in here. But what we want to do with that dimension, if we go to the green check mark, so we're going to click on a dimension line over here, go to leaders. We're going to make sure that we're doing maximum on 1. Maximum condition there, and then a maximum condition over here. Now we want that ultimately to be 1.4. So if we double click on that, or 0.14, now it gives us that that slot, I think. Well, let's try maybe 0.5 and see what that looks like. Yeah, so we don't want to quite go out maybe the full width of that. We want it to be a little bit less than the full width of the ellipse that defines the wheel. So how about we're going to make that 0.4. Now it looks almost like a circle in here, but we're going to go ahead and crack that. We're going to go ahead and put a dimension here. We're going to make that 0.13. So with those two dimensions defined and those two sketch relationships in there, the coordinate, a coincident relationship with the origin, horizontal relationship with that, or that vertical relationship with that line, that defines the very center of that slot. 0.4 inches for its width, and for the radius up here, 0.13. Now we're ready to do something with that. So let's do this. Let's go up to features, just jump right up here, go to Extrude Boss Base, and we're going to start from the very top. And this one, instead of from sketch plane where it is right now, we're going to do offset. And let's go ahead and offset maybe 2 inches, because we know that's 4 inches in diameter. So if we go to 2, that's a little bit too much. 1 inch. We have to think radius here, not diameter. So if we go to 1 inch, now you can see it's going to be extruding up in that direction. So we're going to go up here. We're going to go to up to next. Now it's going to go up to the wheel. We could also go up to surface and maybe define that up here, but that may not give us the intended result, because it really could pick both sides. So we're going to do up to next in that one. Go down here, check direction number 2, up to next in that direction. Pretty simple choices in here. And if we go to the green check mark, now we have our spoke in place. So let's go ahead and rename that from Boss Extrude, and we're going to call that Spoke with a couple spaces in there. Alright, the next item on our list is the wheel handle. Very simple. We're just going to go to the right plane up here. We're going to sketch out a circle on that. So let's go normal to it. If we right click on that right plane, and we can go normal to it, we're going to go to sketch. We're going to do a circle. We're going to try to pick up an implied relationship with the origin down here. So if we click inside of that circle and the origin itself, we can make those vertical. We're going to put a dimension on that of 1/4 of an inch, 0.25. And now we have to define a distance between that and the origin. So if you click on that circle and the origin itself, and if we put in a horizontal center line down here, we could do the diameter in that. But I think if we just click on 2 here, that'll allow us to do that. So very simply, go to Features, extrude boss space. We're going to kind of pull that out. What we want to do is pull that out about 2 inches. And if we park that out right there in the 2, you can confirm that over here by putting that into the Properties Manager. You can take this arrow and actually pick values in here. So, don't see 2 in there right now. There it is. And we can confirm that over here by going over to our Properties Manager and making sure that that's 2. Once we do that, go to the green check mark. Green check mark. And now we have our wheel. We have our wheel handle. So let's go ahead and rename that. And now we're all set with that. Okay, so from the wheel handle and our spoke that we have in place, let's go ahead and put in a fillet. So it's going to be a feature fillet. So we want to make sure that the handle has a fillet on that too, but we want to do that before we do our revolve feature. So let's go to fillet. And 1/10 of an inch sounds good to me. You want to make sure that you choose constant size fillet. And what we're going to do, and you also want to make sure we have tangent propagation in here. So that way when we choose an edge in here like this, it propagates right around it, anything that might be tangent to it. Same thing as up here. We don't necessarily have to choose anything flat, but anything close up there. And then the same feature, we're going to go ahead and put that on the handle itself, the wheel handle. And then once we do that, we should have 3 items selected in here, edge 1, edge 2, and edge 3. Go to the green check mark. Bang! Now we have it in place. So let's go ahead and call that our wheel fillet. So slowly click inside of that, and then we're going to add our name to it. A couple spaces after that too. Okay, so now that we have our spoke and our fillets associated with the spoke and the handle up here, let's go ahead and do a circular feature pattern with this. We're going to scoot in a little bit. So let's just jump up here to features. Let's go to linear pattern and go to the arrow that defines that a little bit. And we're going to scroll down to these other options in here. We're going to choose circular pattern. And direction, it's asking for some sort of axis or some sort of line that would define an axis. We don't really have anything visible here. So let's go up here to this button up here called Hide Show Items. We're going to go ahead and take that arrow and pull that down. And this is on our Heads Up View toolbar. So we're going to pull that down, and it's this item that's 2 over and 1 down called View Temporary Axes. So what that does is that anything that's circular is going to have an axis to it. Of course, we have an axis down here in the middle of our hub. We also have a couple axes up here too in regard to what looks like a feature fillet as part of our slot. And we have an axis up here in our wheel handle. So what we want to do is we want to choose this axis for our hub, and there's more than one axis down here too. So there's probably an axis for another feature in here too, because it looks like they're kind of stacked. But we're going to go ahead and choose that. And we're going to do maybe 360 degrees around maybe 7 or 8 instances. So we're going to go ahead and choose 7 just because it's kind of an odd number. It's a prime number. And it features some faces, so we want to be able to choose the spoke. We're going to make sure we go in here and make sure that it's lit up in light blue. It's our selection box in our graphics area. So when we choose spoke, you can see the selection there and how it's going to resolve itself through the graphics area. We don't want to do wheel handle necessarily, but we could do the wheel fillet. Now you can see the preview of the fillet. And the fillet looks like it's going all the way around. It's going to give us kind of a funky outcome. But because the fillet's not going to resolve, it's probably not going to do that for us. So if we stick with all the other default settings in here and just go to the green check mark, bing, now we have it in place. So let's go ahead and rename that circular pattern to something that's a little bit more descriptive. Spoke pattern. Sounds good. And a couple spaces there too. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a bottle cleanup. I'm going to take my rollback bar and roll back the hub in here, and it looks like no apparent change in here, but we're going to go ahead and delete that. And watch, this is a nice little trick. We're going to delete just about all the child features that came with that. So delete child features, which is going to include the wheel fillet, the wheel handle, the spoke, and a spoke pattern, all below the bar down here. It doesn't show, yeah, the spoke pattern's going to go, but there's some things missing here. Might be a little bit more cleanup, but let's go ahead and do yes and see what we got. So we have our sketches in here. We also have a wheel in here too. So we're going to right click on that sketch. We're going to go ahead and delete that. Delete our wheel, the old wheel. It doesn't give us an option for delete child features because they're not really there. Then these last 4 sketches, if we right click on those, go ahead and delete, we can delete those too. One at a time, where you can do yes to all. So now we have everything nice and cleaned up in our feature manager tree. We have our wheel in place. We can probably turn off the temporary axes since it kind of looks cluttered if we do that. It looks like we still have our axis up here. I think I'll probably it'll probably disappear once we redo our rebuild, which you did. Okay, to summarize, let's take a rollback probably and take a look at what we just did. First, we put in a hub that was going to revolve feature, and if we take a look at the sketch associated with that, we just revolve that around the axis here, which is defined by that horizontal line right through the origin on the right plane. And then we went ahead and did something very similar with the wheel. So we used the right plane in that, designed an ellipse in there, put those various dimensions in there to define that. So not only do we have to define the length and width of that ellipse, we had to make sure that 2 points in there were horizontal, or maybe on that line, that center line which came up from the origin. We also had to put a diameter dimension in there too to get that defined. Spoke, if you remember, we did an extrude. We did an offset for the from option there, and we offset to the next item up here, which is the wheel. The opposite direction we went to next, and also went back down to the hub, which put that in place. Wheel handle was independent. We put in our wheel fillet, which included the handle and the spoke, and we did a spoke pattern as a circular pattern. And of course, all these things in parametric design could be modified. We can take our spokes and maybe do 8 of them, or 9 of them, or 6 of them if you want to do that. Everything can be modified here. So that's our wheel for our Sarrus mechanism.